Mercury retrograde begins on Tuesday, May 10th, and it will continue for 3 weeks until June 3rd. Let's take a look at what it means for each sign. My name is Anastasia. I'm a traditional Western astrologer specializing in natal, relationship, and predictive astrology. If you're new here, please subscribe, hit the like button, leave me a comment. I appreciate all of the connection I have with you guys, all of the communication. I'm currently doing a Taurus season special. Every Taurus gets 20% off natal and solar return readings. There are coupon codes down below, and if you'd like to book a reading with me and would like to work with me, there's a link down below for that too. So we have been in the Mercury shadow period since roughly April 25th, 26. So you may have already been feeling certain effects of the retrograde. Personally, I've had a bunch of things I had to reschedule and then a bunch of technological issues. But other than that, everything seems to be fine. I mean, it's not officially the retrograde yet, but honestly, personally, I don't mind the retrograde. It's a little bit of an excuse to take things slow and, not take responsibility for your own mistakes. Be like, it's not me. It's not me at all. So this retrograde begins on May 10th and it's going to last until June 3rd. Mercury stations at about 5 degrees Gemini, and then it goes back to 26 degrees Taurus. So if you have any planets between 26 degrees Taurus and 5 degrees Gemini, it might affect you more. Let me know if you do in the comments below. But you will look at what topics does the planet rule. Say it's the moon, and moon is connected to the home, family, motherhood. And when Mercury goes retrograde over that planet, you know that it means that Mercury would have already aspected it once direct, and then it goes retrograde, and then it aspects it again direct. So topics connected to that planet we are rethinking, right? So with the moon, maybe you need to change your place of living. Maybe something is happening in your family that requires attention. Maybe it deals with you becoming a parent and you're kind of pondering those topics. And then whatever house is ruled by that planet, or houses in the case of everything but sun and moon, will also be impacted. So if the moon is your third house, if the moon rules your third house, if Cancer is your third house, you may expect even more topics connected to your daily life schedule, technology, neighborhood, so maybe changes happening there. So Mercury goes retrograde at the same time as Jupiter enters Aries. And I did a video on Jupiter entering Aries. Definitely check it out because it's an important transit that's going to last for the next 5 months. And then again later in the year for 5 more months. But Jupiter entering Aries is like green light for everything. There's excitement, there's a burst of enthusiasm, spring energy. You're ready, you're willing to take risks, you want to do it now. At the same time as Mercury stationing retrograde, Mercury stationing retrograde tells you that not yet, you don't have all the information yet. So there might be that energy of like, we have these new initiatives and we know where we want to go, but we don't quite know all the parts yet. And it takes us a minute to figure it out. Also feels very much like, you fire a rocket into space and then you gather some data about the meteors that will be ahead for that rocket. Then you sort of have to adapt and you have to adjust things that you thought maybe you already had figured out. And since it's also moving back from Gemini, the sign of adaptability, ideas, having multiple interests, to Taurus, we're also very much focusing on moving back from having a million ideas to figuring out the best way to implement it and the best way to bring us long-term results. It's also interesting because the degree that Mercury stations at before it starts to go direct, and before it starts to go direct, is the same degree as the lunar eclipse degree. where, you know, the sun will be during the lunar eclipse. So it's basically all connected. Everything is connected, as always. So some of this rethinking has to do with the topics introduced by the, you know, Taurus solar eclipse and Scorpio lunar eclipse. And there's videos for that on my channel. I'm actually going to post the lunar eclipse video shortly after this one. So some of the important dates to watch out for: on May 21st, there's a Mercury cazimi at 0 degrees Gemini. Mercury cazimi is the moment when Mercury conjoins the sun perfectly. And every time the planet is conjunct the sun, it is empowered, it is cleansed, it's improved in some regard, it gets a new mission, it gets new beginnings. So you can expect on a personal level deep insights, deeper understanding, clarity. Perhaps you're getting some news. Perhaps you're reshaping your goal, figuring out the new way of approaching the problem, and the new way of going towards it. Of course, it's the middle of the retrograde, so it's still not recommended to do any crazy, like, you know, introducing new projects. Kind of hold off on that. On May 22nd, Mercury returns to Taurus, kind of significant. So some of the topics of Taurus, you know, implementation and long-term and bringing material resources into our life might become more significant. Maybe you start to be more interested in topics like land and food and money and property, all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, like June 3rd is when Mercury stations direct. And like I said, it's close to the degree of the upcoming lunar eclipse. So it could be significant, especially connected to the lunar eclipse that's about to happen shortly soon. Some of the usual retrograde rules: make sure you're sending the message to the right person. Avoid reaching to your ex, because the feeling of looking back is likely temporary, right? Like Mercury goes backwards because Mercury feels like it's forgotten something. So if you feel like you've forgotten something with your ex and you need to talk to them to clear it out, do it. You know, I'm not gonna tell you don't do something if you feel a strong urge to do it, if it's important for your healing. But beware making any commitments, beware restarting any relationships, because when Mercury goes retrograde, and that's the truth for Venus or Mars retrograde too, you're likely to see things very differently. Or, you know, you do reach out to the ex, you talk to them, and you're like, okay, that's why it didn't work out in the first place. Double check your schedule, allow extra time for travel, allow extra time for packages, retrograde proof your technology, get extra light bulbs, extra batteries. Make sure your phone is not falling down, or get like a hard case for your phone. Focus on people in your life. Make sure you're not just floating in your head. Make sure you're paying attention to the relationships you have. And if you're feeling confused or lost, give extra time to self-care. You can never go wrong with extra self-care. Do you guys feel normally affected by the retrograde, or do you think that it doesn't really bother you a lot usually? So let's talk about Mercury retrograde through all 12 signs and what it might mean for you. For Aries rising, the retrograde begins in the 3rd house, and then Mercury returns into the 2nd. So Aries rising had the eclipse happen in the 2nd house, and there's major new beginnings financially likely. Maybe there is a new source of income. Maybe there's new money-making ideas, new career opportunities, or maybe you're considering spending money on something. So Mercury retrograding from the 3rd house into the 2nd can definitely bring a need to spend money on your skills, maybe taking a new class, or if you are, let's say, taking on a new passion project, like becoming a web designer or a photographer, you need to buy new lenses, you need to upgrade your equipment. So there might be a little bit of that, like looking at your tools, looking at everything you have in your life, including looking at your schedule and maybe opening up space for that and spending money, or using the things that you already have and using your schedule to open up space to make more money. There might be certain communication issues and communication difficulties connected to finances. Maybe you need to talk to your boss and express to them that, hey, my schedule changed and I've actually been devoting more time to this project, and please give me more money. Relationships with siblings can be a topic of significance at this time. Maybe a sibling is going through a hard time, and you're kind of stepping up to help them. And there's a general kind of like reshuffling, I think, in your daily life. Something might be changing, something might require adjusting. More than anything, I think when Mercury goes retrograde in the third house, you might run into the classical Mercury retrograde things. Computer breaking down, message not getting delivered, sending a text to someone that it's not meant to be. So just do the usual rewrite, recheck, redo, and be careful. Sometimes Mercury retrograde here can increase a sense of worry and anxiety and kind of like more agitation. So lean into self-care, take breaks, treat yourself kindly. And and there might be a chance to iron out and solve some problems that are connected to your siblings, connected to your neighbors. For Taurus rising, the Mercury retrograde begins in the second house and then it moves into the first house. So, Taurus rising, there's a lot of focus on you this year with North Node in your first house. You are redefining who you are. You're starting a business. You're kind of taking center stage, very much trying to figure out who is it that you want to be. And when Mercury goes retrograde in the second house, it is very much about your values. It's about what truly matters to you, but it's also about finances. It's also about what's worth spending on. So if you are starting some kind of major new development, studying a new thing or opening a business, Mercury retrograde might ask you, do you have enough money? And then if you don't have enough money, maybe it's time for you to open a savings account or consult bank employee, right? Like kind of plant some seeds and figure out and shuffle finances in order to get ready. There might be spendings. You might be spending more money on the things that matter to you or like investing into your future. Mercury retrograde in the second house could be like tricky at times because it could mean that you get some money, but then you have to return it. You have to pay it back for something. So at times it may bring spendings that you didn't anticipate, like, certain things that you didn't really matter to you. And I think there will be topics of value might be quite important too, like what is important for you, what is worth your attention in this life, and is it the opinions of others or is it what makes you happy and how your happiness differs from the happiness of others. I think it's very much about building your confidence, and money is a byproduct of that oftentimes, whether asking for a raise or making or investing into your well-being, spending on yourself. For Gemini risings, Mercury begins retrograde in the first house and then slowly backs into your 12th house. This is connected to your personal projects and it's connected to your physical body. For Gemini risings, there's the lunar eclipse in the 6th house of health and diet and exercise. So this retrograde to me feels very much as, there might be a bigger question of like, how are you treating yourself with all of these things that you're interested in and all of these professional new beginnings? Are you taking care of your body? Are you taking care of your mind? So maybe it's time to invest into it. And then it is about your personal projects, and it's like, Jupiter is in the 11th, so maybe it's connected to social media. Maybe it's connected to collaborating with others. And you feel excited about it, but at the same time, you need to rethink something. You need to pull back and maybe redo your logo or rewrite your business plan, redefine your goals. And it's also backing into your 12th house. So there might be certain blind spots that you need to address, or certain things that you haven't thought about. As well as 12th house deals with all the self-limiting thoughts and self-undoing kind of like negative beliefs. So with Mercury backing away into your 12th house, feels very introspective and feels very much like, well, if you're not feeling good, or well, if you're not acting on your desires, what can you do? How can you take care of your mental health? How can you examine the way you talk to yourself? And how can you address, like, heal your inner child, talk to your inner child, face any past traumas to feel better and to be more ready to go for it when Mercury goes direct. Very much first house Mercury retrograde can also be a change to your appearance, change to your look, a desire to upgrade your wardrobe. You're sort of rethinking the way you want the world to see you. Like, I mentioned changing your logo or changing your branding. And that could be business or it could be personal. So maybe suddenly you decide to invest into a new skincare routine. Of course, be careful to not rush, don't color your hair pink. You don't want to like make a decision that you might regret later. For Cancer risings, this retrograde begins in the 12th house and then it backs into your 11th house. So 12th into the 11th, like there might be, maybe you're dealing with certain traumas connected to friendships. Maybe you're looking at the past relationships and past dynamics you had with someone in your life who you used to consider a friend, and now it might be the time to let them go. 12th house is the place of losses and the place of releasing things. It's the last house, right? So it has to do with completing the circle. So I feel like there are certain things that are connected to friendships, or even connected to your hopes and dreams and your plans for the future that you're called to let go. It might be a lot more introspective for you, Cancer risings, the time where you kind of step back and retreat and focus on mending your wounds and taking care of yourself, so that when Mercury stations direct, you can become more clear about what you want in a friendship, or what your future goals are and how you'd like to be presented, to present them. I was listening to the Astrology podcast, and Austin Koppock was talking about releasing a book. And, if you are a creative individual and like you have a project coming out, something that will put your work in front of a lot of people, maybe this retrograde is the time where you sort of like retreat and do the final checks and kind of do a lot of work behind the scenes before it's ready to come out. Both 11th and 12th also deal with helping others and working with other people and doing the kind of work that benefits people. So maybe you're committing to some kind of spiritual journey or joining a group that is very spiritual and that will feel a lot more supportive than the groups that you associated with in the past. For Leo risings, the retrograde begins in the 11th house and the Mercury stations direct in your 10th house. So there's a lot of new beginnings and things shuffling around in your professional sector. Maybe you're starting a new job, maybe you're embracing a new professional role. And with Mercury going retrograde in the 11th house, it's likely that you're going to have to address and take a closer look at people in your life, at people in your immediate network, and people who sort of have influence on your future and your opportunities. Maybe you need to figure out what kind of new connections to make. You may need to figure out who's standing in your way and what kind of connections are not helping you, possibly. What is of value to you, right? Like in a friendship, is it about the person helping you reach your goals? Is it about them emotionally nurturing you, or is it about something else, like, the longevity of a connection? There might be a sense that you're rethinking that. Of course, because it backs into your professional sector, it also feels very much, how do people in my immediate network can help me get my goals, and how can we collaborate together? So maybe it could be a good time to figure out any exciting new collaborations with other people. 11th house deals with social media, so you might be rethinking your social media strategy and how you can possibly use social media to your advantage. And 11th house also is responsible for hopes and dreams for the future. So with you rethinking your hopes and dreams, there might be readjustment to how you see yourself proceeding when it comes to career, or where you see yourself ending up in. And of course, there might be certain uncertainty when it comes to professional matters, because Mercury does go back into your 10th house. And don't worry about it if you feel uncertain, because this is all part of a longer cycle. And yes, Mercury is retrograde and it's, you know, it's its own event, but your 10th house, your professional matters, is a longer cycle that spans almost 2 years, from 2022 until 2023. For Virgo rising, the Mercury retrograde begins in the 10th house and then it backs into the 9th house. So there's certain professional matters that need to be sorted through. And it's likely that those matters, it's profession, but it's also where you see yourself in the future, what you see yourself, like what role you see yourself embodying. And of course, Mercury retrograde can create confusion and uncertainty about those topics. But Mercury moving backwards into the 9th house is making me think that whatever you're trying to figure out about the future might involve moving or learning or teaching. Possibly also legal matters or publishing. So let's say you feel confused about where you are professionally, and then maybe the answer is to take a class and explore something new and see whether you like it or not. Or maybe the answer is to become a teacher, and then you need to proceed, you need to make a plan, you need to connect with other people, figure out how you're going to promote yourself, etc. Perhaps the right job opportunity asks you to move to a bigger city. So there's kind of like serious topics that need to be considered when it comes to this kind of stuff. And like, you know, legal and publishing, maybe you want to be a lawyer, or maybe your next step professionally deals with publishing your work and becoming a writer. There might be communication difficulties at work, communication issues with your colleagues and your bosses. It might be actually a really good time. Like, you know, people sometimes worry about applying for a new job, but this could be a lovely time to reapply for a job, or maybe you actually hear back from the old job that you've applied for in the past. And also, if you have started the application process before the retrograde and you hear from people during the retrograde, it's also kind of all connected, you know, don't really worry about that. For Libra risings, Mercury begins the retrograde in the 9th house, and then it goes into your 8th house. So the retrograde from the 9th into the 8th, there might be questions connected to education, any certain legal matters that require your attention, maybe certain matters that require payment, because there is, just a sec. I caught like a cold, so now my whole so my voice is a little weird. It's because of that. So yeah, so there might be, you know, with the solar eclipse that happened in your 8th house for Libra risings, the big theme of the year is getting in debt or taking on major financial, kind of dealing with major financial dealings. It's also about learning to trust, learning to share responsibility, coming together with other people. So there might be like certain financial matters that are connected to that you have to address. There might be certain documentation you have to fill out. There might be changes to your education or travel plans as well. I sort of see this as like, you know, maybe there is a bill that you forgot to pay, or maybe there's a certain like element that is necessary, like a certain document that's necessary to fill out before you can start your new project or you can get that mortgage. Be careful traveling around this time, because it's a more complicated period. Like, you know, there might be sudden delays and things that you haven't checked out. But if you pay attention, if you're careful, if you're like double check everything, you'll be fine. You know, don't just cancel a trip because it's Mercury retrograde. But paying off debts, getting a loan, dealing with any financial matters that are somehow tied to your place of living, to education or legal matters is highly likely here. For Scorpio risings, the retrograde begins in the 8th house and it backs into the 7th house. Very relationship oriented, very much connected to the resources you share with your partner or your partner's finances. Because the retrograde in the 8th might bring your attention to financial matters like bills and taxes and payments that you need to make. It can also be about agreements you have in a relationship and the topics of fairness and unfairness. Scorpio risings have a lot of action in the house of relationships this year. So the retrograde could be kind of like looking closely at the things that are not normally discussed. Like, what about the way you spend money in the relationship? What about your personal space and your partner's space? How much time do you need to be on your own? What are some of the fears you're dealing with? What are some of the past relationship problems that you've had that you need to address? So could be a really great time to talk about these uncomfortable topics and kind of like air them out. And ultimately, that will bring more connection and more honesty and authenticity in your relationship. For Sag risings, the retrograde starts in the 7th house and it backs into the 6th house. Sag risings have a lot of kind of, eclipse energy between the 12th house and the 6th house. So there's a lot of focus on like physical health and mental health. And retrograde in the 7th house might imply a need to address certain relationship challenges or talk about contracts that you have in a relationship. It's both, real contracts in your business, for example, or it could be unspoken agreements, like about who takes out the trash. And especially with the retrograde going from the 7th into the 6th, it's literally like the routine, the behind the scenes of your relationship, the dynamics when it comes to like who is spending time with children while the other person is working. Are you fully satisfied with the way things are? Like maybe you didn't talk about something when the relationship first started and you were like, that's okay, I really care about my partner and I'm gonna allow them to do it. But then later on, it starts to really frustrate you, it starts to really bother you, and maybe now it's the time to address it. 6th house also deals with service and it deals with work. So maybe there's professional things that you need to attend to and need to adjust. And I think streamlining your daily life, streamlining your routine to allow more time for relationship matters is also possible here. For Capricorn risings, Mercury retrograde starts in the 6th house and it backs into your 5th house. 5th house deals with creativity, romance, joy, and children. And the solar eclipse in Taurus on April 30th introduced certain new beginnings there. Like you're on a path to find more joy in life. You're on a path to pursue personal projects, things that make you excited and not necessarily you kind of moving away from caring too much about what other people think, or even working a ton with others, relying on other people to give you opportunities, and you're moving more towards your personal joy. So the retrograde from the 6th into the 5th, to me, is kind of saying like, is there space for this in your life? Is your health supportive of that? Is your diet supportive of that? Is there enough room in your apartment, simply put, right, to allow for you to do the things that you enjoy, or to allow for you to have a creative baby or a real baby? So Mercury retrograde in the 6th house will make you look at your health, will make you look at your diet, at your daily life, at your environment around you. Is it cluttered? Do you need to donate some clothes? Do you need to let go of some of the workout equipment that maybe you never use? Do you need to sign up for a gym? How can you streamline your life right now in the immediate environment in order to have more fun in the future, right? Maybe you need a nursery in your apartment, then you have like a room that is filled up with boxes. So maybe it's about cleaning up that room. Maybe it's about opening space or renting a space for a studio. Maybe it's about taking care of your diet so you can carry a child, so you can be pregnant. There might be certain bills you have to pay, certain matters connected to your pet that you need to address to. But I think it's very much about like streamlining your schedule and seeing how you can have less hassles and maybe spend a little bit less time serving things that are unnecessary so you can serve yourself better. For Aqua risings, the Mercury retrograde starts off in the 5th house and then it moves into the 4th house. Aqua risings with the solar eclipse in Taurus on April 30th have been dealing or have been kind of opening up to new opportunities in their home, maybe a relationship with a family, maybe starting a family. There could be a lot of exciting things happening. With Mercury retrograde starting in your 5th house, there might be a sense that perhaps you've spent a lot of time on the family, or you've focused on the family in your place of living to a point that you are not really feeling excited about things that are going on, or you're not dating, maybe you're not creating, and you feel kind of uninspired a little bit. So this retrograde could be a great time for you to examine the way you have fun and examine what is exciting to you, what makes your inner child happy, right? We're connecting the house of fun with the house of childhood, home, and family. Maybe if you're so focused on your family, now is the time to figure out how you can have fun with them together. And maybe you sign up for, I don't know, a volleyball practice and like find a volleyball team and you play volleyball with your brother or something like that. Maybe you need to move to find more joy, because the changes in the 5th house and desire for more joy takes us to the 4th. So either, you know, changing something in your home or changing your place of living, or maybe connecting with a family member in a better way can be all sources of fun in your life. Rethinking familial relationships, I think, too, in order to add more joy. Be careful connecting with exes, because there might be a sense of like Mercury's retrograde in your 5th house and you feel like nostalgic and you miss something and you feel like right now there isn't a lot of romance, but like when it was so good with that guy or that girl, that was the time. Or maybe even an ex reappears and reminds you of their presence. You want to be careful if you need to, you know, if you need to have another conversation or another go around, maybe you need to do that, but it's likely that after Mercury goes direct, you may realize that it was all kind of like a ghost town, or, you know, it was all a mirage and it's not really something that can make you happy. Maybe, I feel like, I wonder how much of this for some of you might be about like healing the inner child and taking care of your inner child and becoming a parent for yourself. And maybe that sometimes also has to do with saying no to certain things, to saying no to certain familial obligations, or saying no to past relationships knocking on your door. For Pisces rising, there is Mercury retrograde in the 4th house that begins in the 4th and then it goes into the 3rd house. So very, you know, kind of like first thing that jumps into my head is like, we're going from the 4th into the 3rd. There is certain family matters that require you to go on a trip. Like maybe a family member requires your attention and you are, you know, you're setting off on a journey to help them, to kind of like watch over them. Maybe you are dealing with property matters. Maybe there is something happening with your home, dealing with your landlord, dealing with like, you know, my neighbor is a Pisces rising and they're changing our stoves from gas to electric. So there is a very literal example of like, and they waited. They were supposed to do it earlier, but now they're like gonna do it a day before the retrograde, which, you know, hopefully is a good sign. But there might be certain home and property matters that require your attention. And because it's going from the 4th into the 3rd, I wonder if like, you know, if some of the home matters require rethinking and require readjusting and maybe dealing with some paperwork and dealing, like looking for some approval, like you want to add an extra room to your house or to your apartment, but you need to consult the board and you need to deal with like neighborhood matters connected to that. There might be certain family relationships that require opening up and looking at them closely, require examining. Miscommunications are possible. with family members, maybe certain insights about family and about your place in it, or about healthy and unhealthy dynamics are likely. But it's very much, it's like the house of parents, childhood, and the house of siblings, or the house of home and family, and the house of like schedule. So I think you're connecting those energies, and like either are very involved with your family and connecting with them on a brand new level, or you're dealing with property matters and you need to kind of be more flexible and more fluid, and maybe even with Jupiter entering your second house, figuring out the new ways to make money from your property or from working from home. So this is it. Have a safe Mercury retrograde. Check out the Jupiter entering Aries video, and be on the lookout for the lunar eclipse in Scorpio videos soon. Thank you for watching. Bye.